What is up, everybody? Have you ever been reading a book or going through a course or learning something new and you think, wow, I know that information, until the next day when you try to recall it and it's just not there. No matter how many times you repeated it yesterday, it's just disappeared for some reason. Well, in this video, I'm going to give you my 4 favorite tips to be able to use something called spaced repetition and how to remember information long term. So let's get to it. Hey everybody, my name is Josh McCartney and I'm here to shed a bit of a light on the topic of memory, how it's used, why we forget, and how we can use our memory to be able to remember information that's very important to us. So with that said, let's get into it. I'm going to be going over something called spaced repetition today, which is going to be the thing that helps you to be able to remember information, well, pretty much forever if you would like to. But before we get into how to be able to use our memory for recalling information deliberately, I want to quickly explain the difference between something called recognition and something called recall. So most of us, when we think we know information, we'll see something on a page and we'll think, oh, yeah, I've seen that before. When you're given a cue or a hint to be able to remember that information. However, recall is when you are able to recall the information from your mind without the use of external cues. So let's just say that you were learning history, and one of the pieces of information is the Axis powers of World War II. Say that you've read about it before and you look at the page and think, oh yeah, it was Germany and Italy and Japan. But because the information was on the page and you looked at it and think, I know it, well, that's not recalling the information, that's recognizing the information. When it comes to recall, the question could be, what were the Axis powers of World War II? Then you would have to query your own memory and think, oh, it was Germany, Italy, and Japan. Okay, cool. That is an example of recalling the information. So what most people do is they'll read information, they'll know it's important, and they won't have a way to be able to recall the information. But you'll see it on the page, recognize it, and think, ah, I got that. When the test comes around, you're screwed. So let's get into spaced repetition. How did it start, and how can we use it to be able to remember whatever we want? Well, back in the late 1880s, there was a guy called Hermann Ebbinghaus. He became the first person to systematically tackle the analysis of memory, and I dare you to say that 5 times fast. What he would do, he would use one-syllable nonsense words, things like yat and bock and puz, and he would try to see how long he could remember it for. And by meticulously charting his information, which sounds like torture, by the way, he came up with something that we now know as the forgetting curve, which shows within as little as 20 minutes, we forget around 40% of the information. Within a day, about 70% of the information, and within a week, well, forget it. Now, I'm a memory coach, and it happens the same to me. If I don't use the information within that amount of time, I still forget as well. So let's go through my 4 favorite tips for you to be able to use to be able to remember whatever you want. Long term, that is. The first and probably the easiest is to turn whatever information you're trying to learn into the form of questions. Okay? Let's say the Axis powers example. Let's say that you're reading it in whatever book you're learning or whatever course you're in. You write down the question. What were the Axis powers of World War II? Now when you read that, you're going to have to answer it for yourself. You don't put the answer under it, you put the answer somewhere else for you to come back to later. And you would start going through whatever you're learning and just put everything into the form of questions. And what you're doing is you're creating somewhat of a little test for yourself, which you can go through and review in regular intervals. And because it's written in your own language, you're going to understand it much better than if somebody else asks you those questions. So the first step is to put the information into the form of questions and go through it as if it's your own little test. All right? The second way that I really enjoy is to turn this information into visual representations, visual cues, or pictures, if you will. So let's say that you're trying to remember the Axis powers of World War II. Because it is Germany, Italy, and Japan, well, what are things that remind you of those 3 countries? Well, for me, Germany for World War II would be Hitler, right? Adolf. Secondly, for Italy, I think of pizza straight away. Don't know what you think about, but I think about pizza. I paid pizza. Thirdly, for Japan, I think about chopsticks. So I would imagine all these countries, mushing them together, imagine Adolf Hitler eating pizza with chopsticks. And make sure it's really strange and weird. The more weird, wacky, crazy, emotional, actionable these pictures are, the easier it is to be able to remember. So imagine Adolf Hitler trying to pick up a pizza with chopsticks and he doesn't even know how to use chopsticks, right? So it's kind of funny as well. So he's trying to pick it up and the pizza slice keeps falling down. He tries to get in his mouth and it falls. Maybe he puts it all over his face, something like that. Make it weird and funny because the more you do that, the easier it is to be able to remember and the harder it is to be able to forget. So that is step number 2, turn information into pictures. The third tip that I really enjoy personally, which is the king of memory techniques, is something we call a memory palace. You might have heard about it before, you may have heard about it on this channel, but if you don't know how to use it, then I'm going to quickly tell you how. I want you to go to the first room in your house and look around in a circle, pick out 5 large objects. Maybe it's going to be furniture. So it might be a couch, a television, maybe a coffee table, a mirror, a painting, a plant. Whatever those objects are, it's okay. Just list them around in a circle, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Then you could go to the second room in your house. Again, find 5 large pieces of furniture in a circle and list those 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. So on and so forth. However many rooms you want to create, I generally recommend between 3 rooms to 5 rooms of your house, so you have 15 to 25 pieces of information you can store. Now, let's use the Adolf Hitler eating pizza with chopsticks example. Let's say that the first position on your memory palace is the couch, okay? Imagine Adolf Hitler sitting down on the couch with his chopsticks trying to eat the pizza, and it's just getting all messy. He can't pick it up because he doesn't even know how to use chopsticks, right? So imagine that happening there on the couch. And then you would go through, turn more information into pictures, put it on the next place in your memory palace, and then the next place in your memory palace, and the next place is your memory palace. And the good thing about memory palaces is in themselves, they're kind of like mental notes. If you are walking, you can review the information in your head. If you are driving, you can review the information in your head. If you are in the shower, in the toilet, wherever you are, you can recall that information because it's there at all times for you. You don't have to look at the page and try to remember what the questions are. You already have the information stored. And as you recall it a few times, it'll just start to burn into your memory and you'll think, wow, I know that so well. So the third one is use memory palaces. Now the fourth technique is to use flashcards. We all know flashcards, we've probably seen them before, but instead of trying to write down all the information by verbatim, just write down the question and on the other side, the answer. And then what you want to do is set up some reminders to be able to remind yourself to recall that information in increasing intervals of time. Let's say that you write down the piece of information on day 1. Well, try to recall it 1 hour from day 1, and then try to remember it the next day. Then try to remember it 2 days after that, and then 4 days after that, and then 8 days after that, and then 16 days after that. 32, you get the point. What this is going to do is it's going to strengthen those connections over long term. Now, if you don't like physical flashcards, you can use maybe a software called Anki. Personally, I don't love Anki myself. I think it's a very great software, but I didn't find that I connected very well with it. But some of my students do. So Anki is a program that's set up already with spaced repetition software. So you'll create your own flashcards digitally, and then it will cue you to remember it in the right intervals of time. So it is a very good option if you're into that. So those are the main 4 tips. But remember this, memories are not created equal, okay? So not all memories are created equally. You'll notice that you remember lots of important areas of your life or events that happened. Maybe you can remember things like 9/11. Maybe you can remember your 18th birthday. Maybe you remember the first time you kissed somebody. Maybe you remember your worst nightmare. These are emotionally charged events. And when emotions are brought into the equation, it kind of forces your brain to pay attention. The more attention you place on something, the more likely you're going to remember it. So that's why when we turn things into pictures and make it really weird and funny and crazy, the brain is able to remember it very, very easily. So let's go over it really quickly. Recognition is when we recognize information on the page and we think, oh, we know that, but we couldn't recall it without the page. Recall is when we are able to recall the information without the use of the page. The next is to put the information that we want to remember into the form of questions. So that when we have a lot of questions down, we can have our own tests and then we can go create our own review process for that test that we create. The next one we can do is turn that information into pictures. So remember, the Axis powers of World War II were Germany, Italy, and Japan, and our picture was Adolf Hitler eating pizza with chopsticks. Then we can put that into our memory palaces. We'll go throughout our house and label our furniture 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, so on and so forth. And then we'll place those pictures into those positions of the memory palace. And then we can just recall the information whenever we remember to do so. Maybe when we're driving, walking, riding, on the bathroom, in the shower, it doesn't really matter, as long as you just get into the habit of recalling the information. The last one, we can use flashcards. Put in the question and the answer on the other side, set up our own timings to be able to review that information. So an hour later, a day later, 2 days, 4 days, 8 days, 16 days, so on and so forth. And if you might be thinking, Josh, that seems like a lot of work to recall that information, then remember this. It takes a lot less time to remember the information in increasing intervals than it does to try and remember it 1,000 times in a day and still forget it again. Then need to relearn that information again, try to review it 1,000 times that day, still forget it, try to relearn it again, so on and so forth, the endless cycle of forgetting. So use spaced repetition as your friend. The simplest way to put spaced repetition is recalling information in increasing intervals of time. This is going to help strengthen those connections that reinforce those memories in your brain. Because just like our muscles, if we don't go to the gym, we lose our muscles, right? Just like if we don't use our memories in our brain, we also lose those connections. So make sure to keep reinforcing those connections so it's strong information that can last as long as you want it to. So that's all I got for you today. If you like this information and it might help somebody else, please share it because it would help keep this channel alive and grow bigger. And I can't grow without the support of you guys. So thank you very much. Have an awesome day, night, morning, evening, wherever you're at.